Welcome to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Make sure you check out the Facebook page for them, Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. Also, you can go to Seat Giant and get a 10% discount by putting in the code LEGEND, or mybookie.ag, up to a free $1,000 cash on your first deposit. Make sure you go to gruelingtruth.net, click on the mybookie.ag banner at the top of the page, or you can go to mybookie.ag directly and put in the promo code TGT50. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. Like now, I would like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm always good, man. It's always good to be on this show and talk some boxing, and we got a few things for you guys tonight, so I just sit back and relax.
Ooh, that sounded kind of sexy, Jeremiah. All right.
Yeah,
I don't know what kind of...
I have a side hustle.
I don't know what kind of things you've got for us, but I'm a little worried. All right. Bob Arum says he's put out offers to a number of top heavyweights for lineal champion, quote-unquote lineal champion. That's his words. Tyson Fury's next fight in May or June in the United States, and he's waiting for the signed contracts to come back. Arum isn't giving any clues about who he sent the contracts to, but Oscar Rivas and Bryant Jennings look like two of the opponents he's looking at. Emmanuel Char could be another, Jeremiah.
That's the one you were saving for me, huh? That's that tasty morsel you were.
I don't know. I think Bryant Jennings, looking at what just happened to him recently, may be a worse call than Manuel Char.
What? Nah, man. I still think Bryant Jennings would beat the crap out of Char. I'm just not impressed with that guy at all. But
me neither. But I'm not impressed with either one of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, at least Bryant Jennings, to his credit, I mean, I know it was years back, at least he fought Vladimir Klitschko, competitively. At least he's got that. Manuel Char doesn't have crap, I mean, Manuel Char got knocked out, brutally against Maris Briedis, who is a cruiserweight. So, it shows you, just the two distinctions on, what levels they're on. But, Manuel Char, no, let me get that out of here, man. I don't want any of that. Oscar Rivas, that's fine. I think that's doable. I don't mind it. After knocking out Bryant Jennings, Rivas is he's a shorter guy. Yeah, he can bit, and his technique is pretty good. He's got some savvy. You can see that he's been in the amateur ranks for a long time. So he's serviceable. It's not a bad opponent. And again, with top rank, you're always going to get, most times you're always going to get these in-house type of deals. So again, none of that is too surprising. And, with Rivas's height, Fury won't have to worry about too much. Jennings is taller. I think he's got an 84-inch reach. I think that's probably even a tougher styles matchup than Rivas is. And Char is just, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't want to see any part of that. But again, it is what it is. Top rank, if they're wanting to control this whole, Fury's destiny and try to milk the rematch for all that they can, it's no surprise. It's just no surprise at all to me.
Yeah, and the thing that's sad, though, is the fact that Bob Arum said they were going to take these interim fights to make this fight bigger. And I don't think Wilder fight in Brazil, and I definitely know Fury fight either one of these three guys is not going to make the fight any bigger.
Well, especially if Fury does not go out and get a knockout. I mean,
he's not.
Fury's
He's going to walk around for 12 rounds and look at him. He couldn't knock out Sefer.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, and Rivas is a guy who seems to be pretty tough. Bryant Jennings is a guy who's pretty tough. Manuel Char's probably got the best. He's probably got the best chance of knocking Char out, but it's just one of those things. I mean, Tyson Fury kind of is what he is. He's a boxer type, he's going to extend you. He did score a knockout over a guy like Christian Hammer, but generally he's just taking you the distance, especially when he's anywhere near the world level. So, you put him against Jennings, you put him against Rivas. I see both of those fights going 12, and again, you kind of, if you're wanting to build somebody's brand, I mean, you, especially as a heavyweight, you'd like to see him score a knockout. So, if that's really all that you're trying to get out of this, and I guess Manuel Char is the best go-to option there, but it's just not that exciting. I I don't really. I think I'm like you. I don't really know what that does. I mean, maybe they think just fighting in the U.S. even once, even if it's not a star-making performance, maybe they think it's good enough. I just don't know. I don't really see it. I mean, as a hardcore fan, it doesn't really get my engine running. It doesn't really, build anything up. Right? I'm not anticipating the rematch with Wilder anymore, no matter what they do. I mean, I don't really care if Tyson Fury goes out and knocks Char or Jennings or Rivas out in a single round, which again, that would be uncharacteristic of him. But that one really, again, that wouldn't do anything to build the fight for me. But if they can somehow pack these houses and get a lot of butts in the seats, and maybe it'll do a little something.
All right, we had another announcement today that may help boxing, at least bring a couple fights together that we may want to see, and that's MT Global with Top Rank. They've kind of merged a little bit. You want to explain that and why it may help?
Yeah. So MTK Global they've hit the scene pretty hard, and in recent years, and I know a guy who works there, Mirko Wolf. Hey, if he's listening, what's up, man? But yeah, they're a management company. They've got a lot of fighters under their belt. As the name implies, they are global. They do have fighters from all over the place, and they're constantly scouting talent. And I know they've got guys in a lot of them seem to be in Europe. I know they got a guy in France, Nordine Obali, the guy who won the flyweight trinket against Rashid Warren, and a number of the other guys. But why that's so interesting and a good thing from an American standpoint is they have guys like Billy Joe Saunders, they've got Josh Warrington, they've got Carl Frampton, and them doing a deal, shaking hands with Top Rank means that we can get some more interesting fights in the future. So you look at Oscar Valdez, and this means that maybe he'll fight Josh Warrington, which would actually be a fun fight. I would look forward to that one for sure. Carl Frampton versus Valdez, that makes some sense. Actually, it's kind of already been in the works, but after Frampton's last loss, not so much. But Frampton was for a little while the quote unquote interim titleist for the WBO, which is unsurprisingly what Valdez had. So this means that a lot of these guys are getting in the back rooms, shaking hands, making deals, and you're going to see these guys, right? They're going to be exposed to a broader audience. You'll get some better pairings, and that's a good thing for boxing. So I think it's a good deal. I mean, and you got to give credit to where credit is due. I mean, we don't always give Bob Arum the biggest round of applause on this show, or any promoter for that matter. But he is. I mean, the dude's like over 80, and he's still wheeling and dealing. So I give him credit there.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to another thing that we always talk about John with, and that's the ratings on the boxing. It's Saturday night, Sean Porter against Ugas fight. Actually, a good fight. And it got good ratings this time, Jeremiah, so it wasn't as bad as the week before, and it shows you if you put on a decent fight, people will still watch.
Yeah, and that's what I got to commend PBC for. I think they're doing, DAZN and Top Rank, they're making deals with, right, ESPN and ESPN Plus and, this big new streaming service, yada, yada, yada. That's all good and well. But the thing you have to credit Heyman for is that he's trying to get it on free network TV. And, the fact that almost 2.2 million people saw this, I mean, technically it was, 2.197. That shows you that there's some markability in this. I mean, and you remember how good the ratings were when Keith Thurman and Sean Porter fought. When you put on fights like this, I mean, it's simple, right? I mean, these promoters and these boxing insiders are constantly talking about, well, slap a trinket on it and that'll make it sell better. Well, I mean, if you just strip away the trinket and look at it for what it is and actually sell the value of the fight and try to, instead of trying to sell me, not trying to sell me on the value of the fight and applying a world, quote unquote world trinket to it, you look at this again for what it is, and it's Sean Porter, a guy who's a top 5 guy, against Yordenis Ugas, who is a top 10 guy. And that in itself is good matchmaking. Again, not all the time will styles mesh well, so it doesn't work well all the time. But again, you know, just the way, again, it wasn't an overly exciting fight, you know, but it wasn't this back and forth brawl, sure. But again, these guys are skilled, they're highly rated, and it did well. So I'm happy about the numbers. I think that's a good thing, and I think the direction of trying to get this in front of as many people as they can is the best strategy. Again, you know, DAZN, I know they're trying to build their brand. You know, ESPN is in a lot of homes as well, but getting on free TV is really where we should be headed.
All right, next up, Luke Campbell. You got a little Luke Campbell news for us, Jeremiah?
Yeah, and it just kind of relates to what I've talked about on the show, I think twice now. You know, we've talked about Lomachenko versus Anthony Crolla, and you know, a lot of people get caught up in the mandatory stuff, like, oh, hey, you know, the WBA says he has to, or else he's going to be stripped of his title. Well, I don't think the WBA is going to take Lomachenko's title away and let Crolla fight for it, but you know, it is the WBA. But this is kind of playing to the politics of the whole thing that I was talking about before. So Anthony Crolla is not seen as having the same kind of marketability or the same kind of skill as Luke Campbell, but Luke Campbell is, in most people's eyes, the better fighter at this moment. So yeah, you kind of ask yourself, why isn't Lomachenko fighting Campbell instead of Crolla? And like I said, like I told you guys on previous episodes, it's because Campbell is the better fighter and they want to milk him of as much money as they can. So what they're doing is they're trying to set him up for a WBC title shot. And so Campbell was in the news today saying that, well, you know, whether Mikey Garcia participates or not, I'm fighting for the WBC trinket. And my guess is that will happen if Mikey Garcia does not choose to come back down to 135. Campbell will get that shot. It will be against somebody. And because he's backed by Hearn, it will probably be a winnable fight. And so I just wanted to make note of that again, this is political. You know, Campbell is a good fighter. I think he would beat – I don't have much doubt that I think he would beat Anthony Crolla at this time either. But, again, it's just political, guys, okay? So Campbell is being maneuvered for the WBC title. Crolla's just cashing out on the biggest payday you get right now.
All right, guys, real quick, we're going to take a commercial break to let you hear from one of our sponsors, mybookie.ag. We will be back in 1 minute and 12 seconds, and we will talk about something a little bit different tonight, and that would be what if Floyd Mayweather Jr. would have lost his first fight to Jose Luis Castillo, and why, in my opinion, and I think maybe Jeremiah's, he would have had a better career if he would have lost. It may sound weird, but we'll tell you all about it right after this. Hi, I'm Mike Goodpaster from the Grueling Truth Sports Network, and I'm here with just one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money. The Grueling Truth has recently partnered with mybookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website, who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on, and that's why the Grueling Truth urges you to check out mybookie.ag. In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on mybookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now and MyBookie will give you up to a free $1,000 cash bonus on your first deposit. Just enter promo code TGT50. That's TGT50 to take advantage of this offer. You can also go to thegruelingtruth.net, click the banner at the top of the page for mybookie.ag, and also get the same benefit and the same $1,000 free cash bonus on your first deposit. So visit mybookie.ag, courtesy of the Grueling Truth, and enjoy winning today. mybookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid. All right, guys, we're back on Inside Boxing Daily. I am Mike Goodpaster, sitting here with Jeremiah Preisser. Make sure you go check out mybookie.ag. Also, check out our show that coincides with it, the Sheridan Report, with me and Bobby Sheridan. Every day at approximately 2 o'clock, you can hear me and Bobby on there. And you can also hear Bobby doing a little Survive in Advance when he does his On This Day. Survive in Advance tomorrow. We'll have Steve, as always, Risley. With Anthony Servino, we'll talk about the NFL free agency, especially the Odell Beckham trade tonight, Cleveland and New York Giants. But that brings us to fight number one, Jose Luis Castillo versus Floyd Mayweather. Very controversial fight. Actually, I think this fight was a robbery, Jeremiah. And I think this. I think, and we've talked about this before, I still think that Floyd Mayweather's entire ego persona was tied up in that undefeated record. I still think if he would have lost to Castillo, I think he comes back, beats Castillo's second time convincingly, which I think he did anyways. But I think it would have made him more apt to fight better competition when he moved up and to fight it quicker, because before that first fight, I mean, he was going after guys like Corrales. He was fighting the best guys, and he wasn't trying to get catch weights and stuff. But I think it would have helped him in the long run if maybe he wouldn't have got that decision.
Yeah, I think you would have had a humbler fighter, because, I think this stuff kind of got to his head over a while. After a while, that's why, he did some catchweight fights, and, that's why he was trying to dictate so much of the negotiations in these fights. It just became one of those things where he became the quote-unquote A side and just started dictating. And again, there's something to that. I mean, I'm not saying that, the person who's on top shouldn't, have a little more will, they shouldn't have a little more forced, just so long as they're doing things that are still fair, I mean, you couldn't say, well, I'm wearing 8-ounce gloves and he's wearing 10. I mean, you can do something like that. But, yeah, I do think you're right. I think he would have been a humbler fighter because he wouldn't have had so much leverage in negotiations. It wouldn't have been such a gap in, between him and the other guys that he fought. And, it would have been one of those things, too, like you said. His legacy is, by and large, predicated on that zero in the loss column. And had he lost to Jose Luis Castillo in the first fight, he wouldn't have had that to fall back on. He couldn't have used that the whole time. And again, that zero is a big reason why so many people tune in to watch him lose. I mean, again, you just see the wins, accumulating over the years, and as a fan, especially a lot of casual fans are like, oh, well, he's got to lose at some point. He's getting older. He's not in his natural weight class. But then, of course, a lot of the hardcore fans we realized that he wasn't challenging himself a lot of these times. And it's not to say that he wasn't fighting some good fighters. I mean, when he beat an old Mosley was still good. I mean, him giving that, 9-round shellacking to Antonio Margarito showed that he was still a good fighter. But, of course, he was many, many years past his best. Right. I mean, that's not the Shane Mosley of the first Oscar De La Hoya fight. And so it just became one of those things where he started milking it. He was fighting a bunch of Latin fighters on Mexican holidays and just getting it for all it was worth. And I think if he did not have that zero, he couldn't do all that. I mean, it's not to say that he couldn't do a lot of that, but with somebody who's already taken a loss, especially in a day and age where so many fans, boxing fans, are hypercritical and they would just pound that into his head all the time. Like, hey, you lost first Castillo fight. I mean, you still get a lot of that because most people do think that he lost first Castillo fight, but it just wasn't official. So you can't. Yeah, and some people go to even greater lengths to discourage him or disparage his record. Like, oh, I've seen some insane stuff. I'm no Floyd Mayweather groupie, but I've seen some absurd stuff in my years. Like, people talking about, oh, I count his sparring match with Paul Spadafora as his first loss. I've honestly seen that. But no, I think you're right. I mean, I think with him having less leverage, he'd have to budge a little bit. If he wanted to make big paydays, especially as a guy who is defensive minded, he would have to take on better fighters. And I think you're right. I mean, I don't think there's much doubt about it, to be honest with you. And I know there's some balance here. I know people will say, oh, well, the fact that he didn't have any losses helped him accumulate his wealth, and they're right. Of course, as a fan, I would like to see some balance. Some of us are bloodthirsty, and we would have said, oh well, he should have fought Casamayor it's Stevie Johnson at 135, and Casamayor at 130, 135, and then Costazu at 140, and then tons of other guys that he did miss. I mean, there were a number of welterweights around at the time that he just didn't take on for one reason or another. So, there are those bloodthirsty people who are like, hey, you should be fighting the best, especially when you're that caliber fighter. You should be fighting the best constantly, especially when you're fighting 2 times a year. So, again, I think he would have had to have worked for it a little bit more, and maybe, just maybe, we would have had the Manny Pacquiao fight years beforehand. I mean, maybe. To me, it's just speculation, but to me, Manny Pacquiao would have been a bigger A side in that, in those negotiations for years. I mean, Mayweather had a lot of leverage because of the zero and because he was, considered the pound for pound best fighter at the time for many, many years. So it was one of those things where, again, I think there would have to be more give and take. You'd have to look at your options a bit harder and fight the better fighters because you're not making as much, fighting Robert Guerrero around Mexican Independence Day or whatever it is. And from a legacy standpoint, his legacy would have been better had he suffered a loss. And maybe people would find that weird, like, okay, well, he lost. Well, okay, so what? I mean, back in the day, the old timers used to say, if you didn't have a loss, you didn't fight anybody, because they realize that at some point somebody's going to get the best of you. And many times, not only in a boxing ring, but in life, taking a loss is the best learning experience you could possibly get, and a lot of times it determines, right. It separates the cream from the crop, or it tells you what the cream of the crop is. Right. But it's, I think he would have had better opponents on his resume at 140, 147, maybe even 154. And I think you might have maybe a genuine top 10 fighter of all time. I mean, had he taken on the Paul Williams of the world or Manny Pacquiao in his prime and beaten him, well, not his prime, but very, closer to it. I mean, Manny Pacquiao probably wasn't in his prime after he left, maybe 135, but he was still very, very good in 2007, 2008, 2009. But yeah, I think he would have just had a deeper resume, a more legacy built resume, and I think it would have reflected better on him as a fighter, because a lot of us have a lot of respect for the money Mayweather when he was down at 130, 135, taking on many of the best fighters available. And then, a lot of us just he lost us when he went up to 140 and on, it kind of became one of those things that it was just so apparent that it wasn't about legacy and it was about money.
All right. What do you got for On This Day?
All right, On This Day, I think, is one that we've talked about on a show before. Obviously not this show, but I think Inside Boxing Weekly, maybe not.
Because it's the worst decision I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, and the Chavez one was pretty awful too, but
no, this was a lot worse. Though Chavez might have won 2 rounds.
No, you're right. Yeah, you are right there. I mean, it was just a bigger fight. But anyways, the On This Day for today is Sweet Pea Whitaker losing against Jose Ramirez in the first fight. I've seen everything that Pernell Whitaker was in. I mentioned before that I went back and watched his entire career. A few years ago, I think it was about 2 years ago. And, this just struck me as political, like so many other things in boxing.
It was beyond political, because you had WBC president Jose Sulaiman, who was Mexican, was rumored to be interested in a unification fight between the 2 Mexicans, Ramirez and Chavez. And, of course, Don King had his grimy little stubby hands in it. The thing that blew me away about this fight was just the blatant disregard for anything. You had Newton Campos, who scored a fight 118 to 113 for Ramirez. Luis Mikel, it doesn't really matter what his name is because he's a fucking idiot, scored the fight 116 to 115. Harry Gibbs is the only guy that had the balls to go against those two. He had it 117, 113. But I'm sure Newton Campos may be Mexican. Luis Mikel, I don't know what the hell he is. But it looks like Harry Gibbs they left alone, and there you go. So this was set up for there to be a rematch, and for there to be a fight between the two great Mexicans, and there was. And basically, Chavez dominated the fight, stopped him in 11 rounds, and then you come after that, and you get Whitaker gets him at the scope at Norfolk, and just beat the living shit out of him the way it should have been. And when you look at it, one of the reasons boxing is so messed up even to this day is Don King. I mean, he's a man that took advantage and ruined so many lives that it's really unreal. If you listened to us last night, we had Greg Haugen on, who told some funny-ass stories. Go check it out, thegriddlingtruth.net. I think it was one of our best interviews ever because we had somebody, Jeremiah, that came on and just told the truth and didn't worry about where it went.
Yep, and I mean, fair warning, he has a bit of a potty mouth, but he was a fun guest. I mean,
so does
like
Jeremiah.
Him.
Jeremiah just said potty mouth. That's so weird.
I know. Dude, sorry. Yeah, it's like I struggle sometimes. I got kids, but sometimes I struggle with the cussing thing. But yeah, it's one of those things. Greg Haugen was a great guest, and he like you said, he was very open and honest, and it's just nice hearing guys like that who just don't care. They're like, oh, I already hung up the gloves, so Don King and all these other guys, they can kiss it. But yeah, in terms of the Whitaker-Ramirez fight, I mean, I think Luis Miquel, I think he was French, but I'm not exactly sure.
Hey, real quick, Ramirez, we have a Twitter message or a message from a guy who says, let's see, what is it? It is a guy named Steve from the West Coast, and he said that Don King saved boxing, Jeremiah.
Well, he couldn't have saved boxing. I mean, maybe he can elaborate in a message if Steve.
Yeah, that would be nice, Steve. If you want to explain in a message how he saved boxing, then we can do that.
Yeah, we would appreciate it. I mean, there's no doubt that, the overwhelming majority of guys that we've had on this show who were associated with Don King, I don't think they would share your opinion, Steve. But again, go ahead and, send us a message and elaborate on why he was good for the sport. And, we'll read it on air and have no problem talking about it. But again, Don King, I mean, come on, some of the what was the tournament setup that Ruben Castillo, a former guest of ours, was on, and a number of other things. But
the 1978, was it the U.S. boxing tournament or something? That's the one that they put on ABC Sports. And who was it that Scott Ledoux fought? Was it Tom Prater? I can't remember who. No, Johnny Boudreau. He fought Johnny Boudreau. Scott Ledoux whipped Johnny Boudreau's ass. They gave it to Johnny Boudreau. And then there was an investigation launched, and come to find out, everything was fixed in that tournament. But, and Steve, whoever this moron is from California, said that he sold pay-per-view. So it sounds like Steve is probably some dude that, sitting in a basement somewhere if he's shorts around his ankles watching Pornhub.
Well, I mean, okay,
I'm sorry, Jeremiah. That wasn't meant to be directed at you.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know what to say, man. You were basically describing my life in full. And yeah. No. Well, I mean, I don't see how pay-per-view can be viewed as some sort of saving element of the sport. I mean, as Keith Thurman, I think, wisely put it a while back, you don't have to, there's no pay-per-view for NFL you can get NFL Sunday Ticket and view more of it. Of course, there are pay services that any sport utilizes because they need to maximize their revenue. But pay-per-view itself is not something that's brought boxing to new heights. I mean, in fact, boxing has consistently gotten less popular amongst the general public. So, we were talking about Jack Dempsey.
Yeah, pay-per-view. Pay-per-view, if you look at it, John Einreinhofer will tell you about it too, is basically one of the things that really killed boxing, because when it became oversaturated in the 90s, because partially of guys like Don King, that's where everything went to hell. And this Steve guy, Um, let's see what he had to say. I don't even know what this means. Steve may be part moron, but the message is get about the fact that King was a criminal.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's honestly, we don't care that he was a criminal so much. I mean, really, listen, I'm an American. Okay, Mike is also an American, right? I think everybody can tell that from the way we talk. And so, like most Americans, we believe that people should get second chances, right? I mean, we realize that people aren't perfect. People have skeletons in their closets. They do bad things from time to time. And, I'm not opposed to guys getting new leases on life. So, the fact that he was, murdered a guy, okay, I mean, talk about a criminal. The guy murdered somebody.
Yeah.
Okay. And right, so I'm all for second leases on life, and the fact that he was able to go from a criminal to a huge boxing promoter is something to be noted. I mean, it's right. I mean, at least he showed some ambition afterwards. I'll give him that. But again, the pay-per-view model is not something that has helped boxing move along, and that's why you see so many. That's why so many places now are getting away from it. I mean, if it was some standard bearer for sports, and this is the thing that I find odd about boxing fans and just boxing in general. And again, as Keith Thurman put it, you don't have to pay. If you have TV, you can watch some of the best athletes in the world on free TV, on any given day. But in boxing, generally you're paying for it. And there used to be a time, with Jack Dempsey, it was the most popular sport in the entire nation. I mean, they were filling Yankee Stadium, with Joe Louis and Schmeling. I mean, it used to be far more popular. Hell, there are stories of gyms in New York City, and there was just about one on every single corner. I mean, it was an ingrained aspect in the military service. Lots of these guys were working with the military and doing all sorts of fundraisers and whatnot. And then after World War II, American participation rates dropped significantly. And then what you've had is a steady decline, right? So you've had fracturing of alphabet soup organizations and on and on and on. And like Mike said, the pay-per-view model was picked up partly because boxing got off free TV. Okay, and do you think that a guy like Muhammad Ali was so endearing to so many fans because they had a pay-per-view model? They're like, oh well, no,
free
it's
TV most of the time.
Exactly. When he fought Leon Spinks, I think the second time, there was something like 60 million people watching that fight. I think those are Super Bowl numbers, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, because what's the Super Bowl do now? What did it do? Like 98 million this year?
Yeah, it's actually dropped off percentage-wise.
Yeah. Well, so I was thinking about this the other day. If you take the percentage of 60 million, with the population level back then, so that was 80. What was that? 78. What was that? I can't remember. But if you do 60 million relative to the population at the time compared to this 98 million compared to the population of today, I mean, these are comparable numbers. If Ali was fighting on pay-per-view, does anybody honestly think that he would be the icon that he is? No. I mean, part of the reason boxing is in such a bad state is because guys like Lomachenko and Manny Pacquiao and some of these other guys are not fighting to as many people as they possibly could be. If you had Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather and all these other superstars fighting on free TV, they would be significantly more popular than they are today. I mean, it just follows logically. I mean, let's imagine that I don't even care about pay-per-view or free TV. Like, I'm just an interested outside observer, and I'm trying to get the objective facts here. The fact is, and it's all quite simple, the more eyeballs you have on you, the more likely you're going to influence somebody. It's really just as plain as day. And then today, this is why you have so many people trying to get away from the pay-per-view model. Again, these sort of and plus, Bob Arum, again, I gave him credit earlier, but he's been one of those purveyors of just awful pay-per-view habits where, you put Manny Pacquiao against an in-house fighter, and then you put a bunch of prospects that might be something in the future. And, these cards are just not stacked. So I don't understand. I mean, and we talked about earlier on the show, Sean Porter versus Yordenis Ugas. what do you think is better? What you think would have been better for them to fight on pay-per-view? I don't get it. Free TV is
Well,
obviously better.
Edwin from the Bronx said to tell little Stevie he needs to go to bed because the short bus leaves early in the morning. All right, guys. Thanks for the comments, Edwin. At least there's one intelligent person that's messaged in today. We will be back tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern. Anything before we wrap it up you want to talk about, Jeremiah?
Oh, man. I'm kind of got a little leftover cough here. I'm trying to get over here for
That's
a second.
what you want to talk about? I meant boxing.
Yeah, no. I was messing with a girl and she gave me a cough I couldn't shake, so I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure what to do there. I think I don't have any health insurance, but I need to go down to see a physician and see what's up. Yeah. Anyways, if I were to talk about anything, that's try to get some send off or something. I mean, I haven't really seen much in the news. I mean, I did see that Vasil Lomachenko said that he'd like to unify 135 and then possibly move down to 130. And I got to say that I actually find it refreshing, and everybody knows that I like Lomachenko anyways, but I do find his honesty refreshing because essentially what he's saying is 135 isn't my division. Yeah, I'm physically more suited to 130, and I actually wish more guys would take that tack because, right, you look at a guy like Adrian Broner, and again, I'm not a fan of Adrian Broner. A lot of people are not. But had he stayed at 135, had he kept his crap together, stuck it out, and he was one win away from beating Miguel Vazquez and being the champion at 135 pounds. I mean, that's all it would have taken. And I think he could have carved out a nice little resume at 135 and maybe justified some of the pound for pound talks, that unfortunately the Ring magazine, they're the biggest culprit there. They actually put him at number 5 without much justification, just what they thought that he was going to become in the future. But had he stayed at 135, he really would have done better for himself. Maybe he would have made less money, maybe. But I think he could have stayed at 135. Again, carved up a decent legacy there and maybe jumped up to 140, before he ended his career. But instead, he went chasing trinkets and this false narrative of him being a, four division quote unquote world champion. And I give the guy credit because he's been willing to take on just about whomever. And I just would have liked to have seen that at 135. I just wish him and more of these other guys were honest with what they really are and not these bloated perspectives of themselves. And I think that's what Lomachenko represents. He's like, they've asked him point blank, in the future, they're like, hey, you want to fight Terrence Crawford? He's like, nah, Crawford's too big for me.
Well, okay, why don't he fight Lopez? I want to see him fight Lopez before he moves down.
Well, I'm sure Top Rank can make that happen. It's just a matter of getting it. And that's why Lopez has been positioning himself for the WBC trinket. I mean, they've obviously said it, and a lot of us recognize it. The kid's got some real talent, so we'll see if maybe Bob Arum can pressure the WBC enough to let him fight for some vacant trinket, and then maybe we'll get the Lomachenko fight. I mean, because if Lopez does have a title, then obviously I think that fight can be made. But to me, it's just refreshing to hear somebody who's like, nah, I'm not going to fight Manny Pacquiao because he's too old. I'm not going to fight Terrence Crawford because he's too big. Hey, 135 is not my natural class. And so I don't think that would be a bad strategy at all to just, get what you can at 135, move back down to 130, and stay at your more natural class. I mean, Tank Davis is down there. Leo Santa Cruz will eventually be at 130 pounds. You never know. A guy like Frampton might be as well. So it's not as if, it's doom and gloom there. I mean, Burchelt is there. So there's some fights that could be made.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But as always, we have a big day tomorrow on thegruelingtruth.net. At noon tomorrow, myself, Steve Risley, will survive in advance. Anthony Servino from the FF Faceoff will be on to talk a little NFL free agency. Thursday, our guest will be Mac Lipister. And Friday, we'll do a little NBA talk with Cole Hanna. Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, we will have the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show with myself, Steve Risley, Colin Hartman, Cole Hanna. We will be previewing the Big Ten Conference Tournament, 11 o'clock tomorrow night. As always, me and Jeremiah will be back. Let's see. What else do we got, Jeremiah? The Sheridan Report, every day, 3 o'clock, GrizzlyTruth.net. Check that out there.
We also had Montero's latest come out. So
yeah, Montero unboxing.
We have the last round coming out tomorrow, which is another boxing podcast.
We also have Jacob Preisser, who you know fairly well, who did really well with another article, If I Was a Promoter, and he wrote this one about... Come on, Jeremiah.
Daniel Jacobs?
That's what I thought.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know.
We'll also have...
out the red carpet for...
Yeah, we'll also have a Boxing Writers preview. Will that come out on Friday, Jeremiah?
Yeah, hopefully I can get it out Thursday if I can get the guys to send me the information quick enough. But
it will
at least be out by... yeah. Right. Yeah, we'll at least have it out by Friday, and I'll get a bunch of writers together, and we'll all make our predictions. And, be sure to check that out. Probably have about 15 guys on there.
All right, guys, so we're going to wrap it up. Make sure you go to iTunes, give us a like, give us a comment, help us out here. Only daily boxing show there is. Make sure you check out the Greg Haugen interview from last night. Go to thegruelingtruth.net, go in the search box, and punch in Greg Haugen. It was a very entertaining interview. So, like if you're a guy named Steve in California and you're a moron and you want to find out about Don King, listen to the Greg Haugen interview from last night because... He'll tell you,
or the Vanes Martirosyan one.
Yeah, or the Vanes Martirosyan one, or the Tim Witherspoon one that I did even before you were on board here. That was like 4 years ago. But you could hear all kind of great Don King stories on thegruelingtruth.net. Excuse me. Starting to get some of this cold from Jeremiah, I think. We must be closer than what we thought. But, all right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Remember, you can hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So, for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.